Thank you for that introduction. I am glad to be here today, and I am excited to be talking to you about the Risk Evaluation and Mitigation Strategies Program, which is also referred to as the REMS program at CDER. I will begin by going over our learning objectives today. After my presentation, I hope that you will be able to identify the role of the REMS Compliance Program. Also, I hope you will be able to identify the components in the REMS program, and you will be able to determine the best practices for having a successful REMS inspection. Our agenda today will include an overview of FDA's REMS Compliance Program. We will also be discussing some best practices for REMS inspections. And then I will briefly discuss how our REMS Compliance Program is operating during the pandemic. The mission of the Office of Compliance is to shield patients from poor quality, unsafe, and ineffective drugs. We do this by addressing patients' risks that arise from violation of FDA's regulations and laws. We develop risk-based enforcement and communication strategies and ensure that drugs that we approve have reliable evidence of safety and effectiveness by ensuring drugs meet post-market safety requirements. Before I go any further, let me begin by telling you what is a REMS. A REMS is a risk evaluation and mitigation strategy drug safety program that FDA can require for certain medications with serious safety concerns to help ensure the benefits of the medication outweigh its risk. So why does FDA require REMS for a specific drug? REMS can be required when medications are first approved by the FDA. REMS may require the drug manufacturer to develop materials for patients, such as medication guides, which are handouts for patients distributed with prescriptions. REMS may require the drug manufacturer to communicate directly to health providers, pharmacists, nurses, and other participants involved in the delivery of health care or medications. REMS may also require participants to conduct activities that support the safe use of the medication. Some REMS may require that prescribers and dispensers become certified in the REMS. Other REMS require prescribers, dispensers, or patients to document safe use conditions. Some actions may also be required for the patient to remain on treatment. All of these requirements or activities are used in combination to achieve the goals of the REMS. So who is responsible for developing REMS programs? Well, FDA can require a REMS for prescription drugs and biologics if the agency determines it is necessary to ensure that the benefits of the medication outweigh the risks. REMS can be required when medications are first approved by the FDA, when risk associated with the use of the medication is known from initial clinical trials, or may be added after marketing when risks are recognized through routine clinical experience. FDA specifies the REMS requirements and approves the REMS program, but the applicant is responsible for implementing and developing the REMS program. There are no regulations for REMS. However, Section 505-1 of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act authorizes FDA to require REMS. we enforce based on this statute. A REMS is a drug safety program that FDA can require for certain medications with serious safety concerns to help ensure the benefits of the medication outweigh its risk. This risk management program uses risk minimization strategies beyond professional labeling. FDA can require different tools to mitigate the risk of the drug and attain the goals of the REMS. These may include a medication guide, a communication plan, packaging and safe disposal technologies, elements to assure safe use, and an implementation system. It is important to remember that all REMS must include a timetable for submission of assessments. Since 2008, approximately 286 REMS have been approved by the FDA. The REMS at FDA website is a great resource, and it includes current information for approved individual and shared system REMS programs. Currently, there are 60 REMS. The data that you see on the REMS FDA website is usually updated when we have new REMS that are approved. About 87% of all REMS that we currently have are elements to assure safe use. About 8% include communication plans. 2% include medication guide only, and about 3% of our REMS include communication plans and medication guides. Elements to assure safe use may use one or more of the elements to mitigate the known serious risks associated with the drug. Of the 60 REMS that are currently approved, there are now about 13 active shared REMS programs. These shared system REMS programs include multiple prescription drugs or biologics and can involve multiple new drug applications, abbreviated new drug application, and biologics. The shared system REMS are developed and implemented jointly by 2 or more applicants. It is important to note that shared system REMS include a single REMS document, REMS material, and supporting documents, which is agreed by all the applicants. The applicants also share in the implementation and maintenance of the databases and infrastructure. This is our organizational chart within the Office of Compliance. We are in the Office of Scientific Investigations in the Division of Enforcement and Post-Marketing Safety. In the Post-Marketing Safety branch, it also includes the Post-Marketing Adverse Drug Experience team, the Post-Marketing Requirements team, and then the REMS Compliance team. So we do a lot of office collaboration. The REMS team collaborates with many different offices, such as the Office of Surveillance and Epidemiology, the Office of New Drug, the Office of Generic Drugs, and the Office of Regulatory Policy, where we all analyze REMS information to protect and promote public health and identify potential REMS compliance concerns. The REMS compliance team monitors industry compliance and conducts risk assessments. We also issue REMS inspections and the Office of Regulatory Affairs conducts REMS inspections. During those inspections, we may also serve as subject matter experts. The objectives of the REMS Compliance Program is to assure safe and effective human drugs are available, to verify accuracy, reliability, and timeliness of REMS information submitted to FDA, to support internal stakeholders by ensuring that REMS materials are submitted, and to monitor industry compliance with REMS requirements. Earlier, I mentioned that new drug applications and biologics must always include a timetable for submission of REMS assessments. These assessments must be submitted at a minimum of 18 months, 3 years, and 7 years after the REMS is approved. The number of assessments reviewed per year is based on the timetable for submission of assessments of the program. FDA has recently been moving towards requiring assessments at 6 months and then annually versus the minimum of 18 months, 3 years, and 7 years to better assess if the goals of the REMS program are being met. When a new REMS is submitted or new changes are considered for current REMS, the REMS compliance team provides comments for modifications to the REMS in conjunction with the Office of New Drugs and the Division of Risk Management, which is in the Office of Surveillance and Epidemiology. The REMS compliance team is involved in various aspects of inspections. We identify inspection sites based on our risk-based assessment tool. We issue inspections to the Office of Regulatory Affairs under the BIMO program. We also work with the investigators as subject matter experts during inspections. We review establishment inspection reports. We determine the final inspection classification on REMS inspections. We communicate with regulated entities. We serve as external and internal resources for REMS, and we monitor industry compliance. The inspection process includes OSI and ORA working together as a team. The Postmarketing Safety Branch REMS team identifies which firms to inspect. The REMS team issues inspections to ORA and provides specific questions for the investigator to ask. We work with the investigator before, during, and after the inspection, and in some instances, we actually attend the inspection as subject matter experts. If not attending the inspection, the team works with the investigator in a consultative manner. The Post-Marketing Safety Branch REMS team writes the establishment inspection memo, and the ORA investigator gives the initial classification. The REMS team then reviews the establishment inspection report and determines the final classification. We then send the final classification letter to the applicant to communicate inspection outcome. So now I'm going to speak a little bit more about REMS inspections. So who do we inspect? We inspect applicants with approved drugs and therapeutic biologics. This includes new drug applications, abbreviated new drug application, and biologics license applications. We also inspect applicants' contractors. It is important to note that the applicant retains statutory obligations to ensure the REMS functions in accordance to the approved REMS. So when do we inspect? Site selection is based on a risk-based approach. REMS inspections are focused on evaluating application holders to determine if the REMS was implemented adequately, that the assessment submitted to FDA contains accurate and complete information, and to ensure compliance with the law and requirements set forth in the REMS approval letter. REMS inspection sites are identified by conducting a risk assessment. We look at the elements that make up the REMS program, and inspection history also plays a role in determining the risk. We give an emphasis on inspection applicants with REMS with elements to assure safe use, which have never been inspected, and also REMS with elements to assure safe use with observations on previous inspections, and that may increase the priority of the inspection candidate. REMS with elements to assure safe use which were modified since the last time we inspected that applicant are also emphasized. We also consider information from other groups within FDA, such as the Office of New Drugs and the Office of Surveillance and Epidemiology, and they also evaluate the REMS and REMS assessments. It is important to remember when you have a REMS with a medication guide, during these inspections, we determine if the applicant is distributing the medication guide to each patient when the drug is dispensed. And the version that is being distributed is the version that was approved by FDA. During inspections with the communication plan, we do the following. We verify the distribution dates. We verify the professional journal communication was in the journal as per the dates provided in the REMS inspection memo. And then we verify that the communication plan is available on the REMS website if that is applicable. What do we collect on these inspections that have communication plans? Well, there are certain items. We collect all the communication material that the applicant supplies to stakeholders, a copy of the dates that the communication plan was distributed. The dates are detailed in the REMS document, and we determine the dates of any material that was presented at any required scientific meetings if it is applicable. Elements to assure safe use, which we refer to as ETASUs, are required medical interventions or actions by a healthcare professional to prescribing or dispensing a drug. ETASU requirements are the most extensive elements of the REMS program. These requirements are intended to reduce a specific serious risk listed in the labeling of the drug. Please remember that elements to assure safe use may use one or more element to mitigate the known serious risks associated with the use of the drug. Requirements for element A includes that prescribers have particular training or experience, or it may require that the prescribers are specially certified. Requirements for ETASU B includes certification of pharmacies or entities that dispense the drug. For element C, it requires that drug administration be restricted to certain healthcare settings. ETASU D requires documentation of safe use conditions prior to dispensing the drug. ETASU E requires monitoring of patients. And finally, ETASU F requires enrollment of patients in a registry. Here are some of the items we collect during inspections with ETASUs. What we need to keep in mind is that patients, healthcare providers, pharmacies, healthcare settings that dispense medication, and manufacturers all need to know about medications with REMS. Patients may receive specific information or counseling about serious risks, and they may need to sign a form acknowledging that they understand, or may undergo lab testing, or they may even have to take surveys. As healthcare providers, the REMS requirements will vary for each REMS, but they may have requirements such as an enrollment, completion of training, documentation of counseling patients, and a lot more. Pharmacies and healthcare settings that dispense the medication may have requirements for certification to dispense and verification of safe use. The specific requirements for each participant is described in the REMS. When we are inspecting, here are additional items we may collect for inspections with ETASUs. We look for documentation of safe use and non-compliance and maintenance of activities to ensure the database is validated and secure. We also request documentation of any activity that is related to the REMS at the REMS program call center. Once an inspection is conducted, the investigator must classify it. NAI means no action indicated. So that means no objectionable conditions or practices were found, or the objectionable conditions found do not justify further regulatory action. Or they may be classified as VAI, voluntary action indicated. And that means that they were objectionable conditions or practices found, but the agency is not prepared to take or recommend any administrative or regulatory action. REMS inspections can also be classified as OAI, which means official action indicated, and in those instances, regulatory and or administrative actions will be recommended. Here are some possible inspection observations that you can cite, for an investigator can cite in a REMS inspection. It could be failure to comply with the medication guide distribution requirements, failure to comply with the REMS communication plan, failure to comply with elements to assure safe use requirements, failure to comply with the implementation plan, and failure to comply with the timetable for submission of assessments. Here are some tips for best practices for REMS inspection. It is important from the start to establish clear and concise procedures and have key documents easily accessible and available for FDA inspections. If an applicant finds out that they have some corrections, or they're in the observation, please document them and have them available. Non-compliance with the REMS program can result in a warning letter. Other possible enforcement action includes civil monetary penalties, seizure, injunction. To date, we haven't had to impose any of these enforcement actions, but they are available. While we find ourselves in this pandemic, FDA does expect that applicants maintain compliance for drug products. But if an applicant is unable to do so, they must notify FDA and continue to maintain and document. We are all looking forward to post-pandemic times where we will be able to resume the compliance program. On January 31st, 2020, FDA issued a guidance to communicate its temporary policy for certain REMS requirements, and that is available. Okay, so now I am going to ask you a few questions regarding what we discussed earlier about the REMS program. The first question: which of the following elements can be included in a REMS? This question has multiple answers. The options are A, medication guide, prescription drug plan, communication plan, elements to assure safe use, implementation system, financial records. Please select your answer in our poll screen. Okay, so the correct answer is REMS. Some of the possible REMS elements are medication guide, communication plan, elements to assure safe use, and the implementation system. Which item is not a REMS compliance team activity? Okay, our options are A, provide subject matter expertise to investigators, determine final inspection classifications of REMS inspections, C, identify inspection sites based on site selection, risk assessment, or D, provide labeling to stakeholders. Please select your answer in our poll screen. Okay, so the one that is not a REMS compliance team activity is providing labeling to the stakeholders. Okay, we're going to go on to our third and final question. After approval, a REMS assessment must not be submitted at a minimum of A, 18 months, B, 3 years, C, 7 years, or D, every June and December. Okay, please select your answer in our poll screen. The correct answer would be every June and December. FDA requires at a minimum that REMS assessments must be submitted at 18 months, 3 years, and 7 years. Recently, FDA has been making REMS assessment due at 6 months and then annually, but the requirement says that at a minimum it must be at 18 months, 3 years, and 7 years. Here is a list of resources. If you have any questions regarding the REMS, we have a lot of resources available for you. In conclusion, there are no regulations for REMS. However, Section 505 of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act authorized FDA to require REMS. We enforce based on this statute. Remember that drugs and biologic applicants holders develop REMS program. FDA reviews and approves them. Also, remember that REMS programs can be used for a single drug or a class of drugs. Each REMS has a specific safety measure which is unique to the safety risk associated with a particular drug or class of drugs. Therefore, no two REMS are exactly alike. In preparation for FDA REMS inspections, please be sure to document everything, all your processes that you have for your program, and that includes during the pandemic and it includes post-pandemic. If you should have any questions, always feel free to contact the REMS Compliance Team mailbox. It's right here available. Any information regarding the REMS Compliance Program can also be found on the FDA website. That wraps up my presentation for today. I will respond to your questions during our Q&A period, and I would just like to thank each and every one of you for giving me your time today to talk to you about FDA's REMS Compliance Program. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Seymour, for that great presentation. We'll now move into our Q&A session. If you haven't had a chance to enter your question, please do so at this time using the Q&A chat pod. I already have some questions coming in. The first question is the following. I'm interested in the electronic format required for REMS SPL. Can you tell me more about that?
In December of last year, and the guidance can be found on the FDA Gov website. If you're searching for it, just look for the document, and it is entitled Providing Regulatory Submissions in Electronic Format Content of the Risk Evaluation and Mitigation Strategies document using structured product labeling.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have another question that just came in. Would you be able to please elaborate on the requirements for ETASUs?
Okay, that's a great question. First, ETASU stands for Elements to Assure Safe Use, and ETASUs are planned safety systems that the FDA uses to control how a medication is administered by healthcare professionals and how it is taken by patients. It's important to just remember that the ETASUs may add requirements for training for the pharmacists. It could also include training for clinicians and require special patient monitoring or counseling. There are 6 elements that constitute the ETASUs, or elements to assure safe use. When you're referring to element A, that requires that the prescribers and the pharmacists and the healthcare professionals may have to undergo special training, and that can also, and element A can also require that certified healthcare personnel that they must register in a database. Element B is also one of the ETASUs, and that requires that there must be certification for the pharmacies. Element C requires that the drug administration is restricted to specific and certain healthcare settings. For element D now, that requires that we provide documentation of safe use conditions prior to that drug being dispensed. For element E, that requires that there's monitoring of the patients. And then finally, element F requires that there's an enrollment of the patients in a specific registry. So for the REMS that have ATASUs, you can use one or more of the elements that I just previously mentioned. So you could have element A, B, C, D, E, or F, but it can only be one or more of the elements, and that is used to mitigate any known serious risks associated with the drug.
Thank you for responding to that question. The next question is, what are the roles of the different participants in REMS?
So, there are different roles for the different participants in the REMS. So generally, the REMS has different key participants, and that can include the patients, it can include the healthcare providers, the pharmacists, the healthcare settings that actually dispense the drug or administer the drug. Each role of the participant is different and is unique for each REMS because every REMS is different. So the specific requirements and the key risk messages of each of the REMS is specific for each medication. The nature of the risk and the settings of the drug will be administered. Each specific requirement for each of the participants in the REMS is described detailed in the REMS document, and it's also detailed in all the REMS materials. An example would be for a REMS document might have that the patients or the caregivers need to know about the medications with the REMS, or it could also be that the healthcare providers who prescribe the medication with the REMS, what they need to know. It could include information about what the pharmacists or the healthcare settings that dispense the drug with the REMS needs to know. Or even it could also include, if you have a manufacturer, what the manufacturer needs to know about the REMS. Just remember that this information, it can be found on the REMS at FDA website, and it is also available on the drug products website, and it's always going to be maintained by the drug manufacturer.
Thank you for responding to that question. Our next question. When can FDA require REMS for a specific drug?
For a prescription drug or a biologic, if the agency determines that it's necessary to ensure that the benefits of the medication outweigh any of the risk. The REMS can be required when the medication is first approved by the FDA, when the risk associated with the use of the medication is known from, like, say, the initial clinical trials, or it may be added after marketing when the risks are recognized through just regular routine clinical experiences.
Thank you for responding to that question. Our next question. Will FDA continue to inspect during the pandemic?
Mentioned earlier, FDA will expects that the applicants maintain compliance for the drug products during the pandemic. We are still conducting REMS inspections, and whenever that's possible, and the inspections are being done for mission critical assignments whenever that is feasible. The Office of Regulatory Affairs is using all the available resources, and we're including the use of remote regulatory assessments to complete assignments, but we're doing that on a case-by-case basis. If it is not feasible to travel for these inspections, then FDA will consider conducting the remote regulatory assessment if that is applicable.
Thank you for responding to that question. Our next question. Are REMS required for EUA products?
In the United States, it is not an international program, so it would not be applicable to EU products.
Thank you for responding to that question. Our next question. Are REMS inspections typically conducted alongside other inspections, such as routine manufacturing, drug safety, post-market, or are they conducted by a separate branch and conducted in a more focused manner?
Okay, that's another great question. So the REMS compliance team and the post-marketing adverse drug experience team, we are both in the post-marketing safety branch, and we do conduct inspections with the post-marketing adverse drug experience team. So we do conduct inspections with them, and then we also conduct inspections that are just totally risk evaluation mitigation strategy inspections.
Thank you for responding to that question. Our next question. Is the inspection after approval of an NDA in the case of the REMS Compliance Program? Or is there an inspection after the approval of an NDA in the case of the REMS Compliance Program?
Is approved. I hope I understood the question.
Thank you for responding to that question. I'll repeat it again. Is there an inspection after the approval of an NDA in the case of the REMS Compliant Program?
Okay, so my understanding from the question is, yes, we do conduct REMS inspections after the NDA is approved. So the answer would be yes. That's when we conduct the REMS inspection.
Thank you for responding to that question. On average, how many different REMS programs do you inspect each year?
So I mentioned that we have about 60 REMS that we manage right now, and we do about 15 REMS inspections each fiscal year.
Thank you for responding to that question. Our next question. What is ETASU?
Ensure safe use, and the important thing that I'll stress again is that they are the strictest requirements of the REMS inspections that we do. REMS are made up of medication guides, communication plans, and the elements to assure safe use, as I refer to as the ETASUs. Those are the inspections that we do, which have the most strictest requirements. Approximately about 80% of the REMS that we do manage are ETASUs. So most of our inspections are ETASU inspections, or inspections that have ETASUs.
Thank you for responding to that question. Our next question. Do generic drug products have REMS?
Okay, that's another good question. So if a drug has a REMS, then any generics for those drugs must also have a REMS. But sometimes the innovator drug and the generic drug will jointly develop and implement the REMS. In those cases, that's what we refer to as a shared system REMS. So the generic product, referencing the product, is subject to a medication guide and elements to assure safe use. The generic must use a single shared system with the innovator for any of the elements to assure safe use, unless the FDA waives this requirement, in which case the generic can then use a different comparable system.
Thank you for responding to that questions. We're going to take a momentary pause to review some of the questions that are still coming in. If you haven't had a chance to submit your question in the Q&A chat pod, please do so at this time. We'll be back in just a moment. All right, we've had a chance to review a few more questions, and this will be the next question. Are the inspections scheduled in advance, and if so, how far in advance of the inspection?
And we have a risk-based assessment that we use to determine which inspections that we are going to inspect. And some of it has to do with, say, inspections that, REMS that have itastals or elements in them. And then if there are issues, say, that we had from a previous inspection, those inspections rise. And then that's how we decide which inspections that we're going to inspect for the following fiscal year.
Thank you for responding to that question. Our next question. What citations are there for REMS inspections?
Okay, so we have several citations for REMS inspections. If you have any deficiency for the medication guide, we can cite you with failure to comply with the REMS medication guide, failure to comply with the REMS communication plan, and then failure to comply with the REMS elements to assure safe use. And then we break that down for each element from element A through F. And then failure to comply with the REMS implementation system. And then finally, failure to comply with the REMS timetable for submission of the assessments.
Thank you for responding to that question. The next question. Did you say FDA is doing remote inspections for drugs?
While we are in the pandemic, we are expecting that applicants maintain compliance for their drug products. So we are still conducting the REMS inspections during the pandemic and whenever where possible. And we are doing the mission critical assignments, and we are doing that by use of the remote regulatory assessments. And this is only going to be done by a case basis. If it is not feasible to travel for the inspection, FDA will consider conducting the remote regulatory assessments.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have a two-part question. Are REMS permanent, and will the FDA ever remove REMS?
Certain components of the REMS. If after the review of the REMS assessment or other information, if we determine that the extra measures in the REMS are no longer necessary to ensure that the medication benefits outweigh its risks, we will remove part of it or remove the whole thing.
Thank you for responding to that question. Our next question. Who is responsible for reviewing and approving REMS?
Okay, so the process is that FDA, we notify the drug manufacturer of the requirements of the REMS. And then the manufacturer will submit a proposed REMS for the FDA to review. So once FDA has reviewed it and we determine if the REMS proposal is acceptable. Then we will approve that REMS. Then the drug manufacturer is responsible for implementing the requirements of that REMS.
Thank you for responding to that question. Our next question. Is there a resource on the FDA website that identifies all the current REMS medications?
It's a list of all the approved REMS, and it gives you all of the information about the REMS. It'll have the REMS document, all the attachments. You can find out everything that you could ever want about that REMS on the FDA at REMS website.
Thank you for responding to that question. Our next question. Who do I contact for information about a particular REMS?
Okay, so as I mentioned earlier about the REMS at FDA website, that is a very good resource because that website includes all the information about the REMS and about the currently approved REMS, or if you want any other additional information about the REMS, you can always email at druginfo@fda.hhs.gov, or we have two phone numbers you can call at the FDA. You can call the 301-796-3400 number, and there's also an 855-543-3784 number. Additionally, you can also refer to the drug or the medication's REMS website, and that website includes information about all the specific programs that are applicable to the drug, and it also contains the contact information for the manufacturer or the person that is the entity that is the REMS administrator.
Thank you for responding to that question. Our next question. What is the regulatory authority for conducting REMS inspections?
That act authorizes FDA to require REMS for certain drugs if FDA determines that a REMS is necessary to ensure that the benefits of the drug outweigh its risk. That is what we use to enforce. We enforce based on that statute.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have time for just one more question. And here's the question, what further steps is the FDA taking to confront the opioid crisis through REMS programs?
Okay, so that's a good question. So FDA submitted a press release in December 23rd of last year, and that can be found online. And the press release addresses the further steps that the FDA is taking to confront the opioid crisis. FDA has made modifications to also fortify the transmucal immediate release fentanyl, or the TERF products REMS program. And we are also evaluating the opioid analgesic REMS. Also, at the end of last year, in December, we hosted a workshop where we invited scientific discussions about methods to evaluate the impact of the opioid analgesic REMS on prescriber behavior and also on the patient outcomes. And we plan on using these discussions to ensure that the methods ultimately used will be scientifically sound, and that they will focus on the collaboration of the different stakeholders.
Thank you for responding to that question. I believe that's all the time we have for questions, and we have a few closing reminders and remarks.